Hi, so today I'm going to be talking about my first critical review out of this series of critical reviews for EDU 5320 for NVU. I'm going to be reviewing this great article that I found about the effects of WebQuest in science education on pertinency and attitude levels for science and technology lessons. This is a great study done in 2012 about using WebQuest in science classes. I've used WebQuest a few times in my classes, but I wouldn't say they're something I use all the time, but I've enjoyed them and students seem to enjoy them. So I was very interested in this article and kind of hearing how it worked and having some backing to using it in my room, or if it's something I should use more often. Quickly, here is a citation for the paper. I will also be putting the citation underneath this video, so feel free to look that over. So the authors of this paper are, I'm going to try really hard on their names, but Mufasa Duguru and Faith Seeker from Korova University, which is out of Turkey. The paper is translated, I believe, so there's a couple spots that wording seemed a little off, but it was really informative. And the great thing about teaching is it's universal. So it's just as important for how students learn in Turkey. It's going to be the same or very similar to how students learn in northern New Hampshire where I'm teaching. So very applicable regardless of where the research is coming from. In the paper, they also reference a bunch of other studies about the use of WebQuest. So you can tell it was well researched, and there was a large discussion section. All right. So our main argument. So the main argument of this paper is that WebQuest will help students remember what they're learning longer. It was the overall takeaway from this paper. Their hope was that it would help with both memory and with students. It would help with both memory and students' attitude towards science. They found that the attitude towards science stayed basically consistent regardless of method used, but that they really showed improvement around memory when using a WebQuest. Their study was done they had 2 classes of 15 that they pre-tested both for attitude towards science as well as knowledge on content, and the 2 classes were very similar. One class had traditional methods of teaching, and one class used a WebQuest to learn about matter. And then from there, they, and the tests used, I want to make sure I'm reading it so I don't mess up. One second. The tests that they used a Mann-Whitney U test, which was a scale of the attitudes towards science. And then they also had a Wilcoxon for science understanding that they gave both at the beginning, after learning, and then they gave it 2 weeks out as well. Or they gave the Wilcoxon 2 weeks out after as well to see about pertinency of remembering that information. So they gave it to all groups, so 30 students in total, 15 control, 15 experimental, and then had both classes were taught differently based off of the experiment. And what was found was that students who went through a constructivist WebQuest had about the same attitude towards science. The attitudes really stayed the same throughout, regardless, both classes, but they had much better memory using that constructivist approach in a WebQuest. So with that, it really seemed to help many students remember better. If I'm remembering correctly, I believe there was only 3 who had negative ranks and 9 had positive growth, and 3 just stayed the same. So a large majority had much increased memory and understanding of the concepts they learned about in the, there was a large percentage of students who had much more understanding about structures of matter from the WebQuest versus the traditional learning setting. So applications to practice. So my biggest takeaway of this is I think I should be looking into using more WebQuest in my classroom. I think I only used 1 or 2 last year. And one of them was in an emergency situation. I had pulled it off of Teachers Pay Teachers. So I think I personally have been underestimating the power of a WebQuest. I'm also thinking a WebQuest could be a great tool to give students for remote learning. I have my kids in person 2 days a week and not 3 days a week. So I'm thinking that could be a great assignment for those 3 days that they're not here, that they could be conducting a WebQuest, and then we can be using that information together when they're here. So I think definitely I should be looking at using WebQuest more, especially to help with the remembering of knowledge. And that could be a great way for them to be learning when they're at home independent versus doing other things. Evaluation. I agree for the most part. I also really liked in the discussion portion of the paper, there was a lot of additional research around, I'm just trying to find it so that you guys can see where I'm at in this discussion section. They found a lot of other papers that were supporting that WebQuest can also have a positive effect on attitudes of students. I think a lot of that has to do with the constructivist approach. Constructivism is great for students and really helps them have ownership in their learning. And I think that's part of why we could see that attitude shift, even though this specific paper in research didn't have it. We have to also remember it was a very small sample size, 30 students, only 15 being exposed to the experiment. So, and we don't know their pre-existing history of science of why their attitude was the way it was. But there's lots of additional evidence that they've cited about having a positive influence. And then there's lots of other research as well that WebQuest can be good for students in their learning. So I think it definitely, I agree with the study. I agree with the additional studies that were referenced. And it definitely rings true for what I've seen in my own classroom, that students enjoy doing a WebQuest. I think they like the independence of it. I think they like the, they're a little bit more in control. They're kind of putting it together. And I think that's something that a large portion of our kids enjoy because it puts them in the driver's seat for their education. And then, is this research valuable to the educational community? I think it's definitely very valuable. As I said, I want to incorporate more into my education, into what I'm doing with my kids. I would like to share also with some of the other science teachers in my building so they could try maybe using WebQuest a little bit more, especially in our different setting of 2020. I think that could be a great tool for all of us. I think this is something that we could all implement more to help our students have a better understanding and better memory, because I feel like there's a lot we do in school and then kids go on a vacation or 2 weeks later you bring it up and they don't remember, and this is showing that it stays with them. So I think that's just so important. And I'm sorry, I skipped, is the argument supported with sufficient evidence? I felt like there's quite a bit of evidence in this. The only thing, personally, as I read the paper, everything's just in tables. I think having some additional graphs and things to help you compare across could be really helpful. But the information's there, it's just takes longer to digest it. And I think there's a lot of support, and they have so many other references too that you can find additional support that they're referencing to support all of their ideas. So overall, I just want to say I really enjoyed the paper. I thought that it was very insightful, and I would like to use more WebQuest in my science classroom coming up, because from this paper I've learned that it can really help our students remember more of what they're learning, and in our increasing technology-based classrooms, I think it can be a great tool to help all of us. Just again, here is our citation, and thank you for watching.